Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. Yes, I'm well. Here we are on Monday, the 29th of April. I was just checking, and it's episode 118. I thought I'd do it early this time because sometimes we get into follow-up and I forget.
It's easily done. It's very easily done. It's nice to be back in the UK. I wasn't gone that long, but all the same, it's still nice to be back.
Yeah, that's true. You've travelled abroad. I've travelled to Manchester and back with the family for a weekend, and so we've both done some travel between us.
We have, and both on trains as well.
No, mine was in a brum because we had to pick up family and there were 7 of us, and luckily we have a 7-seater car. How long did it take you to get to Belgium, I'm going to say?
Yeah, it was Belgium. I had 3 hours Swansea to Paddington. I had 20 minutes across London on the tube. I had a 90-minute wait at St Pancras station, which, by the way, get there early for your train because there are no seats. It fills up very, very quickly in quite a large waiting area. I don't think Brexit has helped this. I think they thought people would just drift through and off to Europe with them. But obviously you've got French police at the border who check you in the UK, and vice versa. You get border force agents on the other side checking you back into the UK in Belgium or in Paris. So yeah, that was all quite fun really. And then it was just 2 hours and 10 minutes from St Pancras in London to getting off the train at Brussels South.
Better than my 4 hours driving from my house in the Cotswolds to Manchester then. I hadn't really thought about it, that we'd have French border police in the UK, and obviously we've got UK border police in France. That's quite interesting. I hadn't dawned on me, but I guess it makes sense to check you before you go all the way there and then have to send you back again.
Yeah, it does. It just means you can cordon off that one bit of the train station, and at that point, there's a little bit of France in the UK. It's quite cool. There's a little bit of the UK in France or Belgium, so that's not bad.
I wonder if they commute to work every day from their respective countries. That'd be quite interesting.
Do you think they're on the first train every morning?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of curious, if I'm honest. Maybe they check the first people on and then get on the train themselves.
Maybe they just have a week in the UK or a day in the UK and they go back on the last one at night. I don't know. There's quite a lot to think about the infrastructure of that, isn't there? I got to say, it is quite a nice experience though. When you're not in the actual Channel Tunnel very long, you sort of blitz through it really, really quickly, and then you're in Lille in France all of a sudden, and you're like, wow, that was really fast. It's a really nice experience compared to UK. And I travelled both classes actually, sort of the business plus class I was in on the way out, and then standard class on the way back because I managed to get there for an earlier train. I had to pay to get my ticket upgraded, €64 to get my ticket upgraded to the train 2 hours ahead. And I lost my business plus class thing. I went down to cattle class. But actually, even cattle class was better than GWR.
Yeah, I don't talk about GWR. That's what I'm having to face on Wednesday, and I'm not looking forward to it.
That's my usual to London, GWR.
Yeah, same. I probably end up getting on a train that comes from your neck of the woods, I would imagine. Often I get the Swansea train home. Right, shall we get into the show and into some follow-up then?
Let's do it. Let's do a little bit of follow-up. So straight in, we talk about healthcare stuff quite a lot, so it seemed natural that this should sit in amongst all the healthcare data that we talk about. Kaiser Permanente, which is a big healthcare provider in the States, had just handed over the records for 13.4 million people's data to Microsoft, Google and others. This is just quite incredible. I mean, this is presumably to help them out with building infrastructure for the future and all sorts of stuff, but this also puts a lot of power in the hands of Google and Microsoft.
Yes, why have they handed this over then? Is this part of a data sharing exercise they're doing?
I presume so. The information given to third parties includes individuals' IP address, name, information that could indicate whether a patient was signed into Kaiser Permanente's account or service, information showing how a member or patient interacted with and navigated the website, and mobile applications and search terms using the Health Encyclopedia. Kaiser emphasised no usernames, passwords, social security numbers, financial account information, or credit card numbers were shared. Because they already have them, Microsoft and Google, so they don't need to. Once you get your IP address and your name,
they probably know more about it than ever. They're just crowdsourcing more data, aren't they? I guess.
Yeah. So this is a voluntary internal investigation into the use of online technology. Apparently,
it's not good, is it? I mean, it does make you wonder when you sign up for something, how much your data is shared, passed around. It's not good.
I don't really like this. I mean, one of my big things as a researcher, and we work with lots of large-scale health-linked data, is it's not the sharing of it now, it's other things that have been shared before or after it that you can come together with at some point and make those linkages. So you've given them this now, whatever else they've got, let's face it, Google know a lot about you. The other choices you can make by linking this to that and whatever else they get over the periods of time, you can get quite specific with that. So I really don't like this.
Yeah, it's like progressive profiling, isn't it? They're slowly just building up a picture of you from different sources, whether it's your location, your gender, your orientation, how old you are, where you live, what you buy, and then slowly, if you combine all that information together, you can have quite an interesting picture of somebody.
Well, forgive me if I've told this story before, but NHS England used to share anonymised information to whoever would pay them enough money. So you could get hospital, say, ED admission records for a particular time, and that would be anonymised, and that was fine. But a tabloid, or maybe it was Google, I forget which one, managed to get taxi records of the same time and linked it with tabloid data, so they could say a celebrity arrived with a broken arm. Why did they arrive at that ED at that time of the morning? You link that back to the taxi records. You look at the Daily Mail's picture of the celebrity arriving outside of it, and you've got their medical record for why they're standing in ED. And it's not hard.
That's quite clever.
It is quite clever, but that's just 3 fairly simple linkages in a data set, isn't it? This kind of stuff is only going to get more detailed and more worrying. And NHS England, as a consequence, no longer sells that information out. Instead, they just give it to the CIA. But this is the way these things work.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Like you say, you can easily deduce things about people, and choices only get easier and easier with AI just gobbling up lots of data from different sources and collating it together.
Yeah, so I don't like it, but I always think it's worth featuring these kinds of stories where people's information is just being sold off. You got to be careful, people. It's you think your healthcare provider would be safer in this instance, but just use a bit of caution.
Agreed. Should we move on to Tesla? Another sort of evergreen topic that we seem to talk about is Tesla.
Yeah, it's a perennial one for us. So we've talked a few times about deaths involving autopilot. Well, now the NHTSA, which is the National Highways Transportation and Safety Authority, I think, found that Tesla's driver assist features are insufficient at keeping drivers engaged in the task of driving, which can have fatal results. So yeah, that seems to link, doesn't it? I just thought this was interesting timing for this story. In a week where Tesla's share price has crashed, basically after the robotaxi story and the cheaper Tesla story, where they've literally had crashes and fatalities as a consequence of their software. And now you've got this with the NHTSA sort of investigating them as well. This isn't great for Tesla. EV sales are cratering. This is a serious problem for sort of the forerunner for electric cars, that Elon himself has had to make a visit to China just to buff the share price this week. So isn't it weird how I'm talking about linkages, how all these things sort of come together? But yeah, I think this is problematic for Tesla and for EVs as a whole.
Before we get into the article, Tesla's share price weirdly has skyrocketed by about 20% in the last 7 days. In the last few days, and actually it's nearly up 40% in the last week. So something odd's happened there. Maybe he's talking to all the right shareholders. But obviously they've announced layoffs of 10% of the global workforce. I think we talked a bit about that last time. It's interesting, this crash day. Obviously it's horrible. There's been a crash. People have died. People have been severely injured. But Elon's view of it is it's still better than, like, the rate of crashes isn't as bad as if people were driving normally, if that makes sense. And I think that is going to be a tricky argument to prove one way or the other, but it's not looking good. And I don't disagree. I've never used autopilot. I've got some features on my car. I don't use them. I do wonder whether people just get complacent with it. And like you say, they're not actively engaged enough to intervene or override the computer, or AI as we're probably going to call it. And so that would be my concern with this.
It is interesting if you watch any sort of car bloggers when they're reviewing new EVs. They quite often have cameras in their hands while they're driving on the highway, and they're filming the screen, or they're filming this and they're filming the other thing. And all of them are relying on an autopilot type feature, be it in the Volvo or the Fisker Ocean or a Tesla or something like that. And they rely on those things. And it's a bit odd. I mean, I use it's not an autopilot, it's just like a slightly cleverer cruise control that I haven't paid for the expensive one in my Tesla. And even that, I think I've said before, it does this thing, phantom braking, where it sees a shadow on the road and it brakes heavily for you while you're on the motorway. So I my full attention's on the road, but instead of covering the brake, I cover the accelerator when I've got it on that, which is just, you'd never do that normally in any other vehicle.
No, you're right. You always cover the brake. Yeah, I kind of agree with you here. I think we've still got some way to go for autopilot. It should be doable, but I think there's a long way for it to go.
Definitely. Autopilot makes you think it can do everything for you in the same way planes can land themselves these days. It's a very different set of affairs, isn't it? There's a lot of extra data aircraft get to help that, and I think it's only some runways will incorporate it. I don't think they should call it autopilot. They should come up with a safer name.
And sometimes you still need manual intervention.
You absolutely do. That's why there's 2 pilots and they're in prime physical condition.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe Tesla should take a leaf out of Microsoft's book and call it Copilot rather than Autopilot, as in it's there to work with you, not for you. And you know what I mean? You're already setting expectation maybe too high.
Yeah, it's still a bit creepy. But sticking with GPT and AI-based things, we can move on to Logitech mice. I know you're a big fan of Logitech stuff. Not that I'm blaming you. I had a offline listener tell me that apparently I was having a go at you talking about Teams the other week. So I'm not criticizing you, Chris. I'm not. Logitech's mouse software now includes ChatGPT support and adds a bunch of weird stuff into your home folder on the Mac. Did you see this?
I've seen it. And look, I'm using a Logitech camera. I've got a Logitech mechanical MIDI keyboard over there. I've got a Logitech MX3S somewhere. I like their stuff. I generally do. However, I'm scared to open the software on my Mac in case it updates to this version, which I don't like. So there's a couple of things here. I think the Logitech Option software is okay. I don't think the software is fantastic. It never has been. It was called Logitech Options before. For some reason, we had to call it Logitech Options Plus now for some reason I don't quite understand because it looks the same to me. So I think their hardware is very good. Their software doesn't do a lot for me. You can do extra settings, which is nice. But generally out of the box, your mouse and your camera and your keyboard will just work on your Mac. But no, the software now comes with ChatGPT support built in and seems to be adding folders to your user's home folder on your Mac, which is a big no-no to me. Like nothing should put anything there unless it's Apple as part of the OS or me. So I think that's a bit not good. But equally, I don't think anybody's happy about where they're going with their software like this. It just doesn't sit right, does it? You need these utilities to run. They auto update usually. I don't like this. It shouldn't be on by default. I don't have a need for ChatGPT button on my mouse or keyboard. Why do I have to have the software mandatory? No,
I agree with you. This is them just jumping on the current fashion trend, that you must have AI and everything. I don't want it in my mouse. The Stephen Hackett that's written this article doesn't want this in his mouse. He certainly doesn't want it installing random folders on his Mac. So I'm with you on this. I've got serious issues. The mouse should be a mouse. The software that comes with your computer should be good enough to configure it. And I think that's a problem for Macs. An unusual criticism for me of the Mac, that it really doesn't want you to have extra buttons and all the extra features that come with, PC have Windows and Linux is able to support lots of buttons all the time. I savagely miss my middle mouse button when I'm on a Mac for copying and pasting text like I can on Linux. It's such a useful thing. You can close tabs with it. You can do more. Why can't you let me, Apple, configure it to do that? Why do I need to install the manufacturer's tools in order to have those extra features of my mouse? The operating system should pick up you've got a 7-button mouse and let you configure it the way you want to do. So I think this is a slight failing of the device vendor, Apple in this case, or Windows or whatever. But for super fast gaming mice where you might want to change the precision or the DPI or something like that for the mouse, maybe. But in most cases, you shouldn't need to install extra software for a peripheral.
I completely agree. This is, it's just all horrible. I was really disappointed when I saw this because I think I have been tooting Logitech's horn a little bit for them.
But our whole podcast is based on the notion that we like the company and we want to get behind them and all the rest of it, as well as put in some solid criticism to them too. And I think it's just another example of enshittification, really, isn't it? It's just them bringing another feature forward that they, in the short term, think it'll boost their stock price because they're jumping in the thing. But in the long term, where does that end for them installing stuff on your computer that you don't really want?
I think my view would be, by all means, have ChatGPT thing, but download it as an optional extra. When somebody ticks the box, I'm not ticking that box. I don't want this. So that's my view. I think they could have still done this to the same end game, but they could have had a much better experience. So you're opted into it. And I think they're lacking that piece.
But exactly that. Make a mouse, make a keyboard with a blank user configurable button or two and let the user key that to whatever they want them to do. By all means, stick up a thing saying, hey, did you know our mouse can do this? And let them choose if they want ChatGPT to be bound to that button. Awesome. But in the main, no thank you. Don't want this.
Agreed.
So moving on, Framework, a company we've talked about a few times. They make laptops with replaceable parts effectively. You can buy them and put them together yourself. I think if you're very careful in what you configure on it, you can get one for about $499 with an older generation chip in it. You got to bring a load of your own stuff. You got to find a processor, you got to find memory and an SSD, but effectively you've got a half decent laptop you can put together. Basically, they're going to move into other things, and I think this announcement was sort of tied with them. They're going to make headphones. I think there'll be Framework headphones available too, and I think this is a good thing that, you know, more user replaceable parts within these things is great, and Framework have got a chance to become, you know, a decent player in the market.
This makes sense. You know, they were going to do consumer electronics. It makes sense. You take a good product, you make a business out of it, and then you increase what that business does. This is, you know, a no-brainer for them, isn't it? So not a shock they're going to do this. I think this is great. I know my son would love one of these laptops because the fact he could change and configure it, 100% up his street. So no, I think this is good, and it's good to see somebody else in that market space.
Totally. High quality laptops where you can replace the parts on, that's a win as far as I'm concerned. As we move towards more user replaceable parts, not being stuck with, you know, everything glued across the motherboard and all the rest of it, which unfortunately makes really great laptops. But at the same time, I think having these alternatives is also good for consumer choice.
100%.
Moving on.
Whilst we're talking about laptops and not being upgradable, should we talk about Apple and their 8 gigabytes of RAM? Because that seems quite a good tie-in.
So this is amazing. I think this stems from ATP talking about, John Siracusa particularly talking about when the next generation iPhone comes out, the iPhone 16, it's almost certainly going to have 8 gigs of RAM on board. So our phones have got, well, the phone I'm not currently using, that's lying like a paperweight on my desk, has 6 gigs of RAM on it in my iPhone Pro Max. And if they come with 8 gigs next year, they'll have the same amount of RAM as the base Macs across almost all the range. Mac Mini, MacBook Pro, MacBook Air all come with 8 gigs of RAM unless you hop up an option. And some nice person, the link to the toot on Mastodon is in the show notes, has pointed out that the base config for Macs has been 8 gigs since Tim Cook started in 2010.
Yeah, I knew it was a long time that we got to 8 gig, and it's just massively plateaued. We were at 4 for a reasonable amount of time, but 8 just seems to have massively plateaued, considering the ceiling has obviously increased over that time. It does feel like at least 12, come on, 16. Like, come on, Apple.
Yeah, please, Apple. This is a long time to say that when we know the prices of RAM, we've been through this ad infinitum on this podcast. And I'm not suggesting that the slope should have continued at the rate it was, you know, for the first 20 years of the Mac, because there's no way that's not sustainable. We'd be at about a terabyte of RAM at this point. But the argument that processors are more capable and you don't need so much RAM doesn't hold true as we move ever further into AI and as we move into ever further into Apple pushing you can do more things with your laptop. And it's crazy that your phone might be more capable than your laptop, your base laptop at this point.
Completely agree. It's bonkers. But Apple are holding steadfast on this one, aren't they?
They are. One thing that Apple have appeared to have given up on, though, after my whinging about it, and I'm not the only one, is they've apparently stopped making fine woven accessories.
Yes. Sorry about that. I was just refreshing the notes. Yeah, this is... I think we've touched on this. This is not a shock, is it? I don't think there's been any good press about fine woven. I've not actually seen any fine woven accessories in person other than just having a browse in the shop. Do you know anybody that's got one? I think you bought a case, didn't you?
I have a case. I used it, and then I went back to it to see how badly it would decay, and it was unusable after about 2.5 months.
It's not good, is it? And I think where they've called it fine woven, they've kind of set themselves up as it's a fine product. I did hear on a podcast last week they should do a pro version of the silicon case, silicon pro case. It's like, actually, that's a really good idea. Why haven't they just done that? The silicon case is well respected, put some metal buttons on it, and they could differentiate it that way. I get to a degree why they've gone down the fine woven avenue. Obviously, we do need to get away from leather. Apple's doing a lot of work on its carbon footprint. But this isn't the solution. Could they not have waited another year? I don't know. And the fact it's been radio silence isn't right. They should have announced, we know the device, we know the cases, the accessories aren't great. We're going to do something. But instead we've just had nothing, which doesn't seem right either.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. It was a terrible product. Right from the outset, people were going, it's marking just in the demo area when they produced them. People were dragging their fingernails across them and saying it's marking and you can't move that. we've had a problem with the silicone cases where the silicone starts to peel off the shell of the case before now, and the leather ones used to do that, but at least to sort of degrade slightly elegantly. The fine woven ones didn't degrade elegantly; they just started destroying themselves. And I don't know that. I think they make a good silicone case, but I wouldn't say it's a long-lasting case particularly. You're into other case manufacturers to have a case that's going to last the same length of time as you might keep the phone for 2 years or something like that. The Apple ones are good for about 9 to 10 months.
Yeah, and they don't need to last for 2 years, but they should be lasting a good 12 months, I would say. Do you know what the best case is for your phone? No case.
Well, with this one, I have been no case.
And how is it? Have you realised it's the future?
I think it only costing 350 quid as opposed to 1,300 quid is a big motivator for me in being a little less protective of it.
Yeah, it's less scary, isn't it? If your phone's 250 quid, you probably don't want to go and spend 70 quid on a case for it, because that massively increases the cost of that device. And if you drop it, whilst painful, it isn't as scary as £1,200, like you say.
I also still think most people should have cases on their phones. I mean, this was sort of a novelty for me, that I'm just trying to get the true Android experience, not have any layers between me and it. And I should probably talk about this in the main show. I've never talked about the construction of this actual phone, and we're going slightly off the rails here, but this is a very well-made device. You know, it's glass front and back. It feels very good. It's a nice bright screen. I can absolutely see the 90 hertz refresh rate on this, which is, I switched it off just to see what the difference would be. It's a very, very smooth phone. I'm for a mid-range phone for when it came out. I think it was $800 new or something like that. It's a severely impressive device. I'm really quite impressed with what Google have done with it. And the camera, as everybody says, is fantastic. Whatever AI smarts they built into the camera, and this isn't the clever one that they've got the adverts for at the moment, where you can circle around the basketball player and move them. It doesn't do that. It might come in a software update, I think. But I'm seriously impressed with the build quality of this phone, and it's their own chip. It's a Tensor chip inside of it.
How quickly you're removing that? It could have been an Apple device that you're holding there. It looks like an Apple device. It's very clean. It looks very smart. Could quite believe it. I've had a demo of the Draw a Circle on an Android device. And basically, if you take a photo, and my colleague took a photo, I think he had a phone on his desk, an actual telephone that you pick up. So you drew a circle around it, and he just moved it out of the image, and it filled the background in. And you and I probably did those things 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago in Photoshop, and do it all manually. It was an amazing demo just to watch. There's some great stuff in there. It's going to be interesting to see how Apple counter it with their AI release of iOS 18. But no, I think those Google devices and the Samsung devices look fantastic. The build quality really does look good.
Yeah, it's impressive. Should we do some news?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm going to hand straight over to you, because this is an event entirely engineered for Chris.
Yeah, I'm mixed on this, so I'm looking forward to it. So Apple has announced May the 7th is the event. It looks like it's going to be for new iPads, because in the invite they had a picture of the Apple Pencil as part of the invite around the Apple logo. There's quite a few different Apple logos they've done for this event. It looks great. So it looks like we're getting an iPad announcement on May the 7th, which is a week tomorrow, if memory serves me correctly. So I'm excited. It's a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. And I was thinking about this. I wonder if Apple has announced the event early because there's just been so much speculation, and maybe that was hurting them. That people are like, what's going on, Apple? It's meant to be about 6 weeks ago we were going to get new iPads. They didn't come. So very happy we've got a date now, something to aim for, rather than just keep checking the news to see if we've got new devices. What we're expecting at this event, I think, is 2 sizes of iPad Air. So the regular iPad that you have now, you just get the one 10.9 inch. There's going to be 2 sizes, roughly akin to what the Pro is now. That makes sense. I don't think we know what chips are going to get in there, or what screen technology. There's talk of the mini LED screen filtering down, and there's talk of it not filtering down, and is it going to be M2 chips? I don't think we really know. But for me, great. Let's build out the iPad. I'm just doing iPad Airs first. Let's build out the iPad Air line, because at work a lot of people ask for a Pro just because they want the big screen, and I do think Apple need to have a bigger screen, like they've done with the MacBook Air, on a cheaper device. So big tick there. And then on the Pro line, again, we're going to get 2 new Pros, 11.1 inch and somewhere around 13 inches for the big one. Possibly the M3 chip, but news has just come out over the weekend that we might get the M4 chip in there, which to me would be potentially problematic for Apple, because they're marketing their Macs as it's got the M3 in it, it's the best chip we've ever done. Are they then going to announce an iPad that is quite a low volume unit, going to have the M4 in it? If it does, for me, it'd be brilliant because I'd like to buy a well-spec'd iPad and keep it for a number of years like I've done previously. So I'm interested to see where they go with that. We're going to be getting OLED screens in the iPad Pros, new pencil potentially. Potentially with a squeeze gesture and some other haptics on it. I don't think we don't exactly know, but we know something's coming. Hopefully new keyboard, trackpad setup for the Magic Keyboard, and potentially a lot lighter, which is important because the iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard is a heavy thing. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm in the market for a new iPad Pro. I don't know whether I want the smaller one or the bigger one. There's obviously trade-offs, but it's great. I'm so looking forward to this event. This event is for me. I'm in the market. I've already spent the money in my head. I just need to work out what I'm going to get for it. So looking forward to it. I think a couple of disappointments for me are I don't think we're going to get any more ports. It would be good to have 2 ports on the iPad Pro, especially. An SD card slot would be nice. But looking how thin it is, I just can't see any of that happening. I'm not fussed about the cameras, other than they're going to move the portrait camera, which is on the short edge of the iPad Pro, and on the other iPads to the long edge, which that's been taken too long to happen. So hopefully that's it. Ooh, apologies for our listeners. I've just realised my heater's on, so I'll turn that off. But hopefully that's it. And so next Tuesday, I'm going to be very excited, I think. So I don't know if we're going to podcast a day late next week. I don't know what we're planning, but we may well do.
It's a funny time of the day, the announcement, isn't it? It's like 7 a.m. Eastern time or something.
Yeah, I think it equates to about 3 p.m. our time. Apparently there's going to be coverage in London for press, so I'm guessing they're putting some press on. I kind of like Apple are doing something a bit different, like they did the Halloween event a bit different. It's quite nice they're mixing it up a little bit, I think, just to maybe they're trying some different things. So it's not too staid. You know, you just sit and watch a video at 6 o'clock. Apple's doing their usual announcement. I quite like that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, next Tuesday, 3 p.m. or probably 5 p.m. I'll be ordering a new iPad.
Well, that's very exciting, and you can tell us what you've ordered. So I think, next week we'll do the podcast after the event, because it would be crazy to do it beforehand and just speculate about the same rumours again. I'll touch on my thoughts about the potential hardware in a minute, but I find the timing quite interesting. This feels like a clear the decks before WWDC type thing, given that it's a month and 3 days before WWDC.
I think it's we've massively overrun on when we were meant to deliver, because we delivered nothing for the whole of last year. And it was the previous year that the base iPad got updated with a new keyboard, with function rows, with the horizontal camera. And I think everybody's expecting that to come to the more pro line. But for some reason, it happened on the cheap line, but the base line first. So I think it's all a bit odd. I think we're all hoping that the iPad line becomes a lot clearer. But I hope they do clear the debts. And if they put an M4 in it, I will be very happy with that, because I am definitely looking for some more performance out of my iPad. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
New pencil's quite interesting. They're saying it's going to have haptics and things in it. That's probably quite a good thing if you can feel what it is you're drawing over, if you intersect another line or something like that. I think that's all quite good. It's odd that I find that the most interesting thing at the announcement. My skepticism of iPad software is long-standing. For me, putting an M4 chip in something that really doesn't justify it is a problem. You know, an M4 chip, and we know how powerful the laptops are. Why, and why? You know, what are they going to charge for 2 terabytes and an iPad to be able to do something really significant with it? It's frankly mind-boggling if they're going to go at that sort of level. So while I'm excited that they do need to tidy the line, because we talked back when they did the last iPad announcement how muddy the lineup was, and some were USB-C pencils and some weren't, and some used the original generation pencil and some didn't, and some had nice speakers and you could magnetically charge the pencil, and it's just all over the place. And then there is the disaster that is the accessories, as far as I'm concerned.
I completely agree with you, by the way, on I think all those points. I think why you're excited for the pencil, the last time we had a proper pencil revision was 6 years ago. So it's great. I bought that pencil 6 years ago. It's still the best one you could buy, but it's 6 years old. Surely the world has evolved in those 6 years. What's Apple been doing in that time?
Yeah, this is odd. For the iPad was going to be, what's a computer? I mean, we remember those adverts really well. And the iPad is just an iPad. It's a big iPhone, and great. I'm really happy for people that can get their work done. I'm amazed. For all I'm like slightly skeptical about it. I'm amazed you can get as much done as you can do on an iPad if you're focused and you can get on with it and you can live, as far as I'm concerned, with its limitations. So there's a class, and you're within that, of people who absolutely use the hell out of the iPad, and great. If that's the way it works for you, awesome. I think it's disappointment I feel when I look at the iPad, that I can see inside of this could be so much more. Start up, let me pick macOS, plug in a proper mouse and keyboard, and let me use it like a laptop. I'm happy as anything. Restart and it's or just switch modes and it's an iPad for when I want to sit on the couch and read the newspaper or something like that. The potential for the device isn't being let down by the hardware, it's entirely being let down by the software. I've said that a million times, I won't go into length about it. M4 would blow my mind slightly. Why would you put it in an iPad before you put it in any other things? The Mac Studio is still in an M2 chip. What is going on? Why would you put it in an iPad before that? So unless this AI really needs some horsepower and they're really going to show the iPad as the place to do that, I don't understand why you'd put an M4 in an iPad.
I agree with you. Or whether they want some more differentiation between the Air and the Pro. Is the M4 even going to be ready? I'm very sceptical on the M4 piece, by the way. But we've not seen any news come out to go, no, it's not the M4. So you would have thought Apple would have put something out through the back channel, which they often do, to go, that report's wrong. But we haven't seen that. So I think there's a lot for debate. But I'm really looking forward to next week's event because I don't think we know. I think the software is going to be disappointing because there will just be a point release to iPadOS to support them, which will be 17.5, and then maybe iPadOS 18 will bring some new features. Hopefully there's going to be some effort put into the iPad on the software front, because often we just get what the phone gets about a year later. So it'd be nice to keep the parity back or go its own way.
I'm happy for that. They just need to do something with it that's not the very half-hearted multitasking bit of this, bit of that they've done over the last couple of years.
I quite like the multitasking. I've really got into it. I'm sorry. I feel guilty for saying it, but I was sat today and pointing at my big studio display, doing PowerPoints. I had 3 PowerPoints open. I was dragging elements out. I'm very happy camper I was today in my element.
Fair enough. Moving on to some unhappy campers. Over the weekend, this story blew up that Apple users were being locked out of their Apple IDs with no explanation. Apple haven't really commented on this, which is the most worrying thing. This wasn't just one user. A whole bunch of people were suddenly prompted to update and change their Apple passwords linked to their Apple accounts. The worst part about it was for those that had turned on the device protection where you had to be in a familiar place to be able to reset your password. They discovered their homes weren't in their familiar places and they were having to wait an hour to reset their passwords. John Gruber looked at his, darling of the show, John Gruber looked at his, and actually his phone wasn't within his device security protection either. It was a coffee shop about 3 blocks away. So he wasn't hit by the bug, but enough people were that they've been getting in touch with him. And that's slightly worrying to me. I mean, I'm not on the phone, obviously for obvious reasons, in the last month, but I've never looked to see where it thinks my stolen device protection things are. But more worrying than this was a serious security issue, where lots of users, not just one, not just 10, hundreds of users, according to the 9to5 Mac article and others that subsequently dropped, were affected by this. Why did it happen? What did it affect? Were people trying to be, was this some sort of social engineering thing to get people's passwords? You should never enter a password when you're unexpectedly prompted to do so. That's Security 101. Apple should comment on this because this is an potentially extremely serious thing, and so soon on the heels of the last device security thing, where the people are being spammed, cancel, otherwise it could own your device password. I think this is a real problem.
Yeah, I think it is a real problem. Like you say, it's worrying Apple haven't come to it. Sorry, while we're talking, I was just looking up where my familiar locations are on my phone so I could comment on it, but I can't seem to find it. I'll come back to that. I think it's a problem, but is this something that Apple have instigated because they're worried about some people's accounts being breached? Or is this somebody trying to hack into, trying to breach somebody's account and therefore it's triggered it? It'd be, considering it's hitting the mainstream media, it'd be good to know, well, what is going on here? I was a little concerned with this. I was away in Manchester. If I did need to go to my safe location, I'm nowhere near it. I'm, 4 hours away down the motorway. So, curious to know what would have happened in that scenario for me. I don't know the answer. I think you have to wait an hour or so, don't you?
You do. You'd have been a bit stuck. But again, no matter what, Apple should comment. If this was an attack, they should say it was an attack. If this was some programmer somewhere flipped the wrong bit, they should say, sorry, oops, we messed up. But complete silence after something like this does not make the company look good.
Yeah, their default is let's not say anything, and I don't think that's healthy in all scenarios. It's just, I don't know, they haven't really moved with the times.
They really haven't. Another way they haven't moved with the times is that they have yet again blocked another Spotify EU update. So we talked about this last show just over a week ago now that Apple weren't releasing the updates via the App Store that Spotify were giving them. This is in a story now from the 25th of April, so more recently, only in the last 5 days, that yet again they're still blocking the EU updates, talking about other payment options are available. This is the same thing they got fined €2 billion for, so I think they're up for another fining.
I wouldn't be surprised, would you?
No, I think they deserve it at this point. This is malicious again.
It's going to be interesting to know when they're on their investor calls how they're going to, address all the fines they're having to pay. Because surely investor going, why are we paying all these fines? Like, it's impacting revenue, it's impacting maybe buybacks, dividends that we talked about the other week. Why are we doing it, Mr. Tim? And it'll be interesting to see what he says to that. Yeah,
and in just over a month, they've got to stand up in front of a bunch of developers, big and small, and make the case for people staying on the platforms and developing for all their new things and their cool new hotness with the Vision Pro and the rest of it. And this does not instill faith in the developer community. Why? Many of whom have gone out and spent, say, $4,500 on an Apple Vision Pro. They're not seeing the return on investment. They're not seeing any forward motion with it. And I take the argument the product's only really 2 months old. It's only been in developers' hands for 2.5 months. I don't feel the buzz that I did with the iPhone, the Apple Watch, the iPad, the AirPods even, I think had more buzz than this. The HomePod had more buzz than this, for goodness sake. So I'd be a bit worried for Apple, as you say, come the next investor call, justify where we're suddenly spending $2 million here, but potentially up to 10% of our overall global revenue in the EU by not being compliant. And then stand up in front of developers and go, we're not letting you do this because why?
Yeah, develop for us. We're amazing. We're a great developer-focused platform. It is a tricky message. I think a lot of developers, they got bitten with the Apple Watch. A lot of big companies raced to do Apple Watch support and then had to walk back from it because it wasn't ready. So that's why I think Vision Pro has been a little lukewarm, to say the least, which probably brings us nicely on to our next story.
It does. So this is quite interesting. Apple have apparently cut Vision Pro production due to low demand. So I think you and I were talking last couple of weeks that it looked like there was going to be EU, UK, other countries' releases. Hasn't happened. They're going to wait for WWDC now, I suspect.
I'm surprised they're not doing it ahead of that. There was talk that it would be before WWDC. Why wouldn't you want to get some units out there? I don't know. Whether we're hearing anything next week with the iPad, I don't know, but they're probably going to want to keep it iPad only.
But apparently Apple now only expects to sell 400 to 450,000 units in 2024. All of 2024? Compared to what they'd hoped for, which was 700 to 800,000. So that's half what they were expecting to sell. And for Apple, 450,000 units is nothing. They probably sell that in a weekend of the phone.
Yeah, drop in the ocean to them, isn't it? So it is lackluster. It'll be interesting to see what Vision Pro 2 software brings, Vision OS. But apparently that's just more of a catch-up one, so it becomes in step change with iOS, iPad OS, as obviously it's built upon the same OS that they are.
But one thing I will say is they move at a glacial pace when it comes to software updates for these things. How long were you waiting for multitasking on your iPad of any sort before you actually got it? You got a version of it, and then to have even decent tweaks to that the year after to fix some of the bugs with it, that took another year. So for them to have shipped Vision Pro in February, I don't think you're going to see anything very significant. You could see that from the Personas update that they were talking about, from very flat, stuck-in-a-box Personas through to the sort of vaguely 3D-ish ones you're reportedly getting now, which are apparently an awful lot better and you get a lot more presence from people. But that's a pretty small update in a couple of months.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like it really moved on since they first announced it in WWDC, which we covered last year of, a year 9 months later, they actually released the shipping version. Nothing really changed in those 9 months. Maybe they just tidied it up and made it more productized, but there was no new functionality. Nothing really improved. So it's going to be curious to see what they bring. And apparently, I'm not sure we got the story in here, but there's no new Vision Pro coming till 2026 at the earliest. So maybe that's right, though. Maybe it's, here's this product, you're going to go through 3 major OS updates before we then release the next one because it's so far ahead of its time.
I don't mind that. I don't mind them iterating on keeping one product because it is so expensive. They found this out with the gold Apple Watch. People don't want to immediately change things from a very expensive device. It's so ahead of its time, hardware-wise, that it can sit in the market for a long period of time while they bring just a Apple Vision without the Pro to the market. And they work on the software and they get developers on board and they build a bit of buzz. I think we need to give it another 6 months before we decide it is a dead product, before we sort of ring its death knell. But it's very early days for the Apple Vision Pro, but they're not. I don't have the feeling that they're behind it. But another way that makes me think they're not behind it is if you go on eBay and if you look at the prices of them secondhand.
Yeah, this is quite an interesting story. Again, it's on The Verge, but they link through, or they've done comparison on eBay. So back on the 28th of February, if you bought, the 6th of March, if you bought a 512 one, it's just shy of $3,000. And right now, if you wanted a 512 one, it's still just shy of $3,000. So they have dropped significantly, I think, over that time, because they retail about $3,500 for the 256 version. And you can buy the 256 version this week for $2,500, so it's about $1,000 cheaper, which for a device that's supply constraint, not available in many countries, it's not good. Normally these things would hold their value, or you pay a premium for it. Do you think we're going to see them in the UK before WWDC? Place your bet.
No, I don't. Not before WWDC.
I think I'm 50. I'll go yes. Why not? Let's recap. I'm 50-50 on it, if I'm honest, because they're in a lot of weeks, but I just feel like the news out of Apple this year has been very lackluster generally. There's just not much happening this year. Maybe I'm going to eat my words in June, but do you know what I mean? It just feels very quiet on the news front. I thought by now we would have had them announced in the UK. We could go and have a play in the Apple Store. I thought we'd have had new iPads by now, maybe some other software updates, but it's been very quiet this year. It's very bizarre.
I'm putting in the show notes, Chris says iPads in the UK before WWDC, so we'll hold you to that.
I haven't got anything to lose, have I?
Well, you could put 10p down or something.
I'll put a £5 in a charity bag if I'm wrong. How's that?
That sounds like a good plan to me. I hope you're right. I hope you're right, not just to save you your £5, but it would be quite good that they did show a bit of life in the market. I think it shows a vote of confidence in the product if they start to bring it to other countries earlier.
Yep, and also I want to go have a demo because I've never done AR VR and I'd love to try it out, please.
So just for Chris, bring it to one Apple store, the one closest to him, and then that's good enough.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. But I think I was quite bullish about buying one earlier in the year, whereas I've gone off that idea now because I think I'm going to end up buying a very expensive iPad instead.
So if they don't come to the rest of the world, I've got a trip to America in September. So I might book my Apple Store experience when I'm there.
Well, there's probably loads of available slots. They may stop demoing them by that point because nobody's turning up.
That is a possibility. Maybe they'll just hand them to you as you go past the store because they can't shift them.
Wow, that would be bad days.
Moving on. Also, speaking of bad days, or maybe slightly better days, apparently the Financial Times, according to this story from The Verge, signed a licensing deal with openAI. We've spoken about openAI at length. This is the company that powers Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, and a whole bunch of that. They were really the company that kickstarted a lot of this large language model process. They've signed this deal with the Financial Times to presumably mine their stories. I guess they get a fair bit of financial data as part of that as well. That's probably quite good for some AI-based nefarious thing.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by this. I do read the FT. I think I've used their articles before. I know they are paywalled quite a bit here in the UK. I like where they're going with some of the technology stuff. They've made a great digital version of the paper, and I'm not surprised they've signed this as quite a forward-thinking thing to do, because I don't think we've heard much out of other newspapers on this. So it's going to be interesting to see how they embed it in. But yeah, I wasn't surprised by this because I do feel like the FT is trying to move away from just being a paper-based company, if that makes sense. And they are embracing modern tech, and they've invested. It feels as a consumer that they've invested quite heavily in their digital offering.
Which is only right and proper given the sort of industry that they're in. Finance is very, very tech-based and always has been. We did have the story that Apple had apparently gone to the New York Times, trying to license some of that content for their chat model. There was another story that I didn't include this week about Apple approaching openAI, about building models for them as well as part of this. So maybe they're struggling a little bit with their own models, but I think companies like OpenAI can see the writing on the wall that they're going to get sued to hell for a lot of the stuff that's contained within the models. In fact, most of those lawsuits have already started. We talked before. I think it was the New York Times who, if you ran a very specific query through ChatGPT, it would spit out the original article that it was produced from. So I think this is them trying to get on the right side of the law this time, because the lawsuits, they are coming.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because we've talked earlier about Apple paying lots of fines, but it feels like with AI, Apple are going the other way in that they're trying to spend the money up front, so they're not having to go for fines. Maybe they have learnt that actually we could do it the right way, so we're not paying fines for it. But yeah, I think you're right. OpenAI. It's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out, because that must be a major risk for them as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of major risks to software, if you write your software systems in the 70s when you're constrained from memory and things like that, and you and I will be familiar with systems like this, and maybe some of our listeners too, wherever you could save a bit of RAM back in the day when RAM was very expensive, you did. So lots of systems developed in the early days, for a date, for example, would only give you 2 digits instead of 4 or 5 or more. And in this case, it's the story of an American lady who's 101, but because the airline system can't keep track of 3 digits, it can only keep track of 2, it thinks she's 1. So whenever she books a flight, they basically think she's a baby. And, it's not a software glitch. This is just the reality of airlines not having updated their software systems in a very long time, because their booking systems are what they are. It's probably why BAs keeps falling over as well. But I just quite like the story that, we still have these sort of hangovers of our tech debt, even from the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it is this tech debt, isn't it? And this is why you get challenger banks, challenger airlines, because they haven't got all this legacy systems run. They can spin up a new fancy service that is very forward thinking, because they just haven't got all this history to deal with. Yeah, I read this and I was like, crumbs, I haven't seen a story like that for a long time. I'm sure you all remember Y2K, and we all had to patch various systems because people were worried computer systems were going to fall over when we hit 2000. But it didn't really happen, and Y2K was actually quite a nice thing, and it was uneventful, I think, from a IT bug perspective. But yeah, interesting. At least the fair play to the lady. She's 101 and she keeps flying. Like, fair play.
Absolutely. And I think the Millennium Bug thing was because a lot of very hardworking IT people did a lot of very hard work to make that not be a problem. So that was good. Unlike the conspiracy theorists who might have you believe that nothing happened because nothing was going to go wrong. No, a lot of people worked very hard so that nothing went wrong.
Agreed.
Moving on to companies that sometimes work very hard. A few things from Microsoft that we've grouped together just for ease of access. The first one, which both doesn't surprise me and does surprise me, is that Microsoft has open sourced, or at least placed the code for MS-DOS 4 on GitHub. So if you're itching to go back to the DOS days and see what that looked like, you can do that. MS-DOS 4, probably the least loved of any DOS ever, frankly. I think it was one of the buggiest ones, but never mind. They've kind of done the right thing and open sourced it, so I'm sure that'll be quite useful, but frankly, who cares at this point?
Agreed. No, I think this is the right thing, though, isn't it? This is the right thing. You and I have talked a bit about, I'm going to struggle to say the word prosperity.
Posterity.
Posterity, thank you. So this is the right thing. I'm surprised they didn't maybe open source a more recent version, but it is what it is. But I think this is the right thing. Whilst I'm not going to be rushing to download it, I did use DOS when I had my first computer in the early 90s. I think I had DOS 6.2, rings a bell for some reason. I think that was quite a popular one as computers were getting a lot more popular. But I think this is a good thing, and I'd like to see more OSs do this, so you can go back and use it, and we can remember the times. I was watching a thing about Command & Conquer Remaster that we spoke about a few years ago. There was a bit of a behind-the-scenes video on YouTube, and super interesting. They went and rescued it, and they've rescued the original footage. They improved it. I think it's just nice. It's there for historical purposes, I guess.
Exactly, and I'm being a little bit flippant about it, but I 100% agree that we've talked before about the legacy of gaming and operating systems and all the rest of it is they will just go away without these kinds of efforts to preserve them. And if you did want to go back and play Command & Conquer or whatever games are around in the DOS 4 era, Civilization 2, Civilization 1, don't even remember, those kinds of things, you need the fundamental operating system on which they ran in order to get them up and running. So I think it's a good thing. Again, I think 5.22 maybe 6.2 might have been more useful for them to open source than this. Or if you're going to do 4, why not do 3, 2 and 1 as well? You know what I mean? Why start with 4? But where's Windows 3.11, guys? Come on, let's have that too.
Yeah, Windows 3.1, that would be good to see. And Rod, I've just sent you a link to some screen grabs of Civ 1, because just as you said it, I was just remembering what that screen used to look like. Oh, love that game. Should we move on, though? Our next article is Microsoft needs to win back trust. Maybe they're doing this by really open sourcing old versions of DOS. But I looked at this article, and I don't disagree. I think they need to win back trust, I think, on two fronts. The cybersecurity piece, which is what the article is really about. But I think also on the advertising piece, which we've got something about it in a minute. Because I just think you kind of feel, I think, using Microsoft products now, that either you're selling my data for advertising or you're about to leak it over the internet and then somebody else is going to sell it. And I think that those two fronts, I don't think they are doing a great job on.
Yeah, I'd agree. And we've featured, and it's not Microsoft bashing. I hope you feel we bash Apple as fairly as we do Microsoft and Google and Meta and all the others. You know, we praise where praise is due. We've praised them for DOS 4. You've praised them more than me, but we've praised them for DOS 4. But the last couple of weeks, there's been stories around adverts and start menus, Outlook being shared with 833 advertising partners, all these kinds of things, you know, not being able to bypass a cloud account to log into Windows 11 or Windows 10 when you try and install it. It's just a continual erosion of what's going on. And we don't even really need to go into all the cybersecurity stuff. We talked about that the last couple of weeks as well, whereas Microsoft are good at lobbying, they're good at getting in, you don't criticize them for doing it, otherwise you look bad. The government is so embedded within Microsoft and its security patches and all the rest of it that it's just a given that they're very secure. But then things like that hack, the Exchange hack, which opened up lots of emails to foreign agents, shows that they're not. And not that I think all companies should be continuously vigilant about this. The big Linux hack recently of the XV thing in SSH that we talked about was a state-sponsored thing over a very long term, 3 to 4 years. And that's only just come out because it's an open source project and everybody can see the code. Microsoft don't open source an awful lot of stuff. They open source some stuff, but not DOS 4, but not lots and lots of things. And I think that's problematic. Open source software is not the be-all and end-all, but you're showing a certain amount of faith in your code that you will let other people crawl over it and potentially find that. So, it's complicated. And I think this article sort of gets it right, is that they're losing trust on a number of fronts. At the same time, they're becoming more and more vital than ever as they move into Azure, as they move into these kinds of spaces, as they are embedded in National Health Service, local government, all the things, your company, at my university, they are a fundamental part of the fabric of the way that we do e-business, teaching, finance, everything. They are fundamental, be them on the server side, and even if you think you're distant for them on the Mac side or the Linux side, you're not. You're like 2 clicks away from a Microsoft service. So it's important to hold their fingers to the fire with stuff like this. I think that they can. Now, they've got enough money, they will just get away with it in the same way that Apple just get away with it. But I think it's important as consumers of tech, purchasers of tech, and decision makers around some things that we're always considering, is this the right thing for my business, my family, my country, wherever you stand on that ladder.
I agree with you. I think Microsoft have got some way to go, but I guess the options for organisations, unless they take Germany's lead and go down the Linux avenue, it's very limited, isn't it? And I think a lot of big corporations are in that same space. They're so busy leaking data or selling data that there is a lack of trust, and it's just accepted as as what you've got to do business with them.
Isn't it a shame, though, that that's the cost of doing business? It wouldn't be much for Microsoft to pull a Broadcom and just go, right, we're jacking up all our prices by 100%. All of you lot on every client access license, every server, every Azure instance, all of it's going up 100%. And lots of businesses would just have to pay it. And right back we go to the start and go, what is the cost of getting out? What is your plan B for this? And unfortunately, if Microsoft actually tried to play that, there would be no plan B and they could do what the hell they liked.
And it is the cost of getting out, as we've discussed before. That's the stealth cost that nobody realises. Totally.
And just a final story to finish on. I just quite liked it in light of the last thing we talked about. Why is Windows 11 so annoying? And I just have to agree with the little bits of Windows 11 I have to use, mostly for gaming, and even that's becoming fewer and further between. It does annoy the hell out of me. It's like 1,000 cuts. For a while there, I think in the Windows 10 day, Windows 7, Windows 10, Microsoft got better. There were signs of them sort of backsliding with Windows 8, Windows Vista. But Windows 11 is not a great operating system particularly.
They're very much a TikTok company, aren't they? Windows 10, I think, was universally received as a great OS, like 100%. Yeah, there's still some screens on top of legacy screens, and that persists into Windows 11. I think there's some good bits in Windows 11, but equally, there's some less good bits. And it is death by 1,000 cuts. I think that they're slowly eroding that experience. Whereas I do think they had done a great job, and I do like some of the look and feel they've done. I think they've done a really good job there. But it's the other things, the adverts, the random content appearing that you haven't wanted, having Teams pre-installed, just all those sorts of things. just feel like backward steps to me. I don't use Windows 11 really. I see it more through people at work, and it is frustrating. I think that they go in that way where you want, especially in a big organisation, you want a clean corporate install, not one that's changing every other month as Microsoft bolts some new feature onto it that they're not going to support in a year's time.
Yeah, they bolt a feature on, they give you an ad in your start menu. Copilot suddenly appears with a software update that you've put there. They try and enforce you to use Edge. They remind you again, please don't use Chrome. It's a continual inshitification again of what should be quite a good product. I think if they've got you, I don't understand what they're trying to upsell you on once you're already there, really. But your eyeballs are of value to them, I guess, or to their 833 other particularly valued advertisers.
It does feel like they've had a bit of a culture change here, though. In the article linked, it talks about Edge, and I agree with this statement. I thought Edge used to be a really nice browser. It was very clean, very minimal, but now you load it up, it's all sidebars, and to get into it, you've got to go through a wizard, before you can even start using it. And I think they have regressed a little bit here. It does feel like quite a culture change in Microsoft that they're now, rather than going for this quick get up and running, they're going down this quick, let's leech as much data as we can, and I don't like it.
Maybe it's this is the death of desktops because everybody's going to use Chromebooks or iPads or something else. So let's just leech, as you've just said, every single dollar out of these end users before they go off and do something else because we've got them in the cloud anyway.
I think, though, the Microsoft will be in the corporate space for a while to come. It'll be interesting to see where they go with ARM support and that side. But people love their laptops at work. They love their laptop for getting their jobs done.
They do, but you've said a couple of times, if you could have a Samsung phone and plug it in and do your work, that's your one device to rule it all, and that's not impossible at this point. Nice big screen, plug it in, wireless mouse and keyboard, and off you go. You can almost do it with your Steam Deck now, frankly. But imagine that being the corporate setup that you just roll up with your phone and you plug in. Microsoft don't have an operating system for the phone. They're not going to have one at this point. What they want is the apps that run on top of it, or the websites you log into to make the best of it. So it's not impossible that you don't need that corporate desktop anymore. You've got your roaming profile installed for your phone for your workers, and off you go.
Cloud services, but it'll be interesting to see how it all bakes out. But I think the phone as your desktop replacement just hasn't really taken hold yet. People probably don't want to dock their phone because they want it on them when they go to a meeting. They want it on them when they walk around the office. They don't want to leave it behind docked. Yeah,
and they don't want their employer particularly to see the funky pictures that are coming in their WhatsApp messages maybe, but that's a whole other thing.
Yep, agreed. I think that's it for news.
I think that's it for news. That was a long news section. Media, we'll try and rattle through fairly quickly. I don't know if you've hit this one, Chris, because you're not a YouTube as much of a YouTube user as I am. I watch quite a lot of YouTube. I've got quite a few subscriptions I watch on there. I get some tech stuff on there, some gaming, Apple News, reviews of TV shows, that kind of stuff. It used to be that if you leave your Apple TV alone for a little bit, after about 5 minutes, it defaults to some really lovely screensavers. I'll give Apple credit on this one. The screensavers in the Apple TV are gorgeous. 4K, drone shots over cities and the country and ice flows, and it's beautiful. YouTube have realised that most people don't mess with their 4-minute timeout in their Apple TV and have injected their own screensaver if you leave it for more than about 3 minutes. It's disgusting and I hate it.
Completely agree. Screensavers universally loved in my house. My youngest son loves them. He always wants to see where they're filmed because you can just lightly tap the button and it will tell you where it's from. They're fantastic. They're so well done. I don't really use YouTube, as we know. My kids do use it on the Apple TV, but they haven't really reported. But I've not heard any murmurings yet. But they will happily sit through YouTube and watch adverts. It drives me around the twist.
Yeah, well, this is just, it pauses on the video you're watching and just sort of slowly zooms in on the screenshot of the video or something like that.
Okay.
So
it's YouTube gamifying the Apple TV, isn't it?
But it's the video you're already watching. They're just trying to keep you on YouTube so you don't come back and your TV switched off, is what I think it is.
Okay, clever.
Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah, and who knows what will come up next, but, your eyeballs are worth something.
Agreed. You're going to now tell us what we haven't watched this week. I've not watched very much because I've been away.
I haven't watched that much either because I've been on trains and things, but I am up to date on Race Across the World, your thing of the week from last week. It still remains a fantastic show. I've thoroughly enjoyed I don't think it's spoilers too much, jump to Thailand, Vietnam this week. Great show, very entertaining. I love it.
I did joke with my family. It's amazing how they made going racing on a bus exciting.
Yeah. and for them to be so far apart, the editing in that show is great.
The editing, 100%. They make a good story out of it. No, fantastic. So, yeah, 2 thumbs up. That's the first thing I watched when I got back from Manchester last night.
I was talking about it to some of my colleagues in Belgium, and there's a Belgian version of it, so they do the same sort of thing, and they were just as caught up in it in their version as we were in ours. So that's well done, BBC. That's a good find you've got there.
Why can't we see their version but with English subtitles?
I'd happily watch that.
Yeah, agreed. I'm there. Give me more.
Oh, you do know there's Taskmaster in other languages, don't you? There's a Dutch version, and yeah. Moving on, Fallout, which I think I mentioned before in this show, is an Amazon Prime show. It's based on a computer game. It's really good. I watched a bit of that while I was traveling. It remains really good. It's got good effects, superb acting, great cast, amazing makeup, properly amazing makeup. If you haven't and you fancy a dabble, go and check out Fallout, even if you're not familiar with the computer game. In fact, particularly if you're not familiar with the computer game, it's terrific.
The only thing putting me off it is the advert I've seen, and there's what looks like a guy, but he's got a weird nose, and then that's just put me off it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, he's a ghoul. That's right. Walton Goggins. If you ever watched Justified or one of those shows back in the day, it's Walton Goggins. Terrific actor. They explain that. They explain the ghouls.
Okay. It's just I didn't like the look of the nose. And for those of you listening, it's I don't know. Imagine having bigger nasal passages. I guess I don't know how to explain it.
His nose has fallen off. Remember, if you see a skeleton, if you see a skull, it ain't got nose, does it? Because it's cartilage, your nose. So it's just a hole in your head, basically your nose. So that's what's going on. I try not
to look at any of this stuff. So I'm very squeamish. So that's put me off a little bit, if I'm honest.
Your homework this week is go and watch Fallout. I think you'll like it.
Okay. I have just renewed my Amazon Prime account, so I think I can watch it now.
Go watch it. Another recommendation, this is on Stars in the UK, is called The Great. I've mentioned it before. It's Nicholas Hoult and Elle Fanning, Dakota's sister. Excuse me. Terrific show. It's based on Catherine the Great and Peter III of Russia. Slightly fictionalized version of what happened there and how she became the Empress of Russia. It's just a terrific show. It's filthy, it's funny, it's extremely well written. I think you as a Succession viewer would particularly enjoy it. Imagine like a costume drama but set with a sort of Succession sense of humour to it. It's really well worth a watch.
Okay, I can't promise, but I will try to watch one of these two.
One of these two. Go Fallout. And then lastly for me, there's just a really interesting article from VLC, which is Videoland Client. A great app that was like a Swiss Army knife for watching various media back in the day and remains so. Just the troubles they're having updating the software on Windows, on Mac, and on iOS, and it's worth a read.
Yes, this is quite interesting. So basically, VLC is saying App Stores were a mistake. Currently, we cannot update VLC on the Windows Store. We can't update VLC on the Android Play Store without reducing security or dropping a lot of users. And for now, iOS App Store still allows us to ship for iOS 9, but until when? So they're obviously not enjoying the App Store limitations that are put in place or the gates you have to jump through to release an update. Interesting. I'm amazed they still support iOS 9. I've not been funny, but I would have thought that would have moved on by now. But I kind of understand their point. I guess it is tricky, isn't it? They are pro. You know, they're a pro and a con in equal measure. I think the app stores, as we've discussed at length.
Yeah, definitely. I think the pain points are becoming ever more apparent as we get more and more locked into them. That's it for me for media. Have you got any?
No, I was away last week on business. I've been away with the family all weekend, so I do apologise for my lack of media that I've consumed, other than Race Across the World, Taskmaster, MasterChef. I was struggling to think about it, so apologies. I've just watched the normal TV shows, so nothing new and exciting, no films, but I will try and remedy that this week.
Fair play. Moving on, games. Unsurprising follow-up when Delta, which is the Nintendo emulator we talked about that Chris has got on his phone. I don't know if you've managed to get any more ROMs or anything on there, Chris, or no?
I've done nothing with it. Sorry, I've just been away, so I apologise. But what you're about to talk about is more exciting.
So Riley, the developer at Riley Test It, said is going to bring it to iPad as well. So I think that's really interesting. You compare your PlayStation controller to that. You compare your PlayStation controller to a phone, but I think it feels more natural on a bigger screen, this kind of thing. And I'll certainly check this out if it comes to the iPad. He's going to bring Delta to the iPad, so that's really cool.
Wouldn't it be amazing if Apple featured Riley, the developer, next Tuesday in their Apple iPad keynote? I think But they need some crazy thinking like that, I think, to help turn the corner of, actually, do you know what? This guy Riley, he's developed the alt store. He's released it in the marketplace. He's done the alternative marketplace. It's called alt store. He's done an emulator following our rules. He's living by our guidelines. They should be holding him up and going, look, this guy's doing it. And he's got great subscription rates, download rates, and we're now helping him get it on the iPad, and he's a great developer. You should all be a good developer. Do you know what I mean? They could make a real good case study out of it, and I think Apple should be doing something like that.
I think you're absolutely 100% right. Will they do it? Absolutely 100% not.
I completely agree with you, sadly.
It's really sad. He's a talented developer. He wants the best for the platform. He sees the advantages of the platform, as you say. He makes great apps, that people want, that immediately shoot to the top of the App Store. It would be a real success story to say, look, as you say, marketplace and in the app, and he's living the life, and he's paying the fees, and he's doing the things, and he's potentially making money out of it. Winner. And he's staying within the law on an emulator as well. But Apple won't do it because they're scared of people highlighting emulators too much. They're scared of Riley giving them too much credit for the App Store, and they're scared of what comes next when they go, hang on, he spoke up. So I can't see it.
Completely agree with you.
Second story, also related to this, is apparently the Providence, which is a great name actually, Providence PlayStation emulator may come to the App Store as well. I thought I'd heard a story about this being an issue for more modern consoles because they require just-in-time compilation, and Apple won't let you have just-in-time compilation. But I would love to see emulators come to the App Store for everything. And again, to my iPad, please, because I'll use the hell out of them.
Yeah, those iPad screens are gorgeous. Let us have emulation on there 100%. I'd like to see a Red Alert remaster thing where you can push like the space bar, you can see the old and slightly improved quality. 100%, let's have that, please.
Yeah, and for me, you sent me a screenshots of Civilization 1 earlier. I played that game to death on a PC and Amiga back in the day, Civilization 1. In fact, I'm sure the Amiga won because I had no hard disk. I had to swap floppies. It came on 2 floppies. I had to swap back and forth between them. Give me an Amiga emulator. I've still got my Civilization floppies somewhere. I could put them as ROMs that I actually owned and put them on my iPad and play that game the way it was meant to be. Well, almost the way it was meant to play. Never the way the original developer thought, Sid Meier's Civilization, thought would be a thing, but how amazing would that be?
Completely agree.
Even though you can get Civilization 6 on the iPad.
You can, actually, and I don't try enough games on my iPad. Maybe that's something I need to correct, because I also wanted to try it, Death Stranding as well. That was that walk-in simulator that was announced, and I still haven't tried it. There's low barrier to entry. It's just, I don't know. I just don't think of my iPad as a gaming device. I think of it as for me, it's my work device and my media consumption device.
Yeah, I mean, it's largely a media consumption device for me. I read a couple of magazines on it this morning. I catch up on the news on it. I will occasionally answer an email, but I feel constrained the second of an Outlook. I want to attach this. I want to look at that. I want to copy that from there, and I hit the bumps too quickly for me. You seem to manage though. I'm going to move very quickly on. But just to point out that you can get Civilization 6, you can get XCOM 2, you can get some really big AAA games. I think, can you get No Man's Sky yet, or was it they said it was coming? Maybe not.
I think they said it was potentially coming. Maybe it came to the Mac, but I don't think it came to the iPad. But a lot of the games you just listed are from years ago. There's not really been that constant feed of games, which is sad.
Civilization 6 is the most up-to-date one.
Yeah, but it came out on the iPad a long time ago. There hasn't been many more games. Do you know what I mean? There's just very few big games come to it. It's a bit disappointing.
How cool would that be in an Apple Vision Pro, though? Something like Civilization 6, where you're sat, you can see the person you're playing against or the people you're playing against all in the same room. I think it would be a hugely sort of impressive feat for the platform, but no.
They had me at Battleships. That sounded amazing to me, that I could sit opposite you playing Battleships in 3D. That'd be awesome.
But £3,500 to do it. Anyway, moving on. I just want to report back. Balatro may be the most addictive game I bought in some time. I had it on my Mac on my trip. I got stuck in a couple of stations, unsurprisingly, on the way back. And Balatro is, when you can't face reading another document and you can't face typing another word into Word, it is just the perfect thing. A bit of strategy. It's absolutely worth checking out for whatever it was, £11 on the Steam. Play it on your Mac. As soon as it comes to the iPad, you've got to get it. You won't play it because it's not threes. You won't play it because it's your iPad. But it is a terrific game. And I run, don't walk to the App Store and get it.
Understood. I will do that. One thing I forgot to mention, actually, just while we were talking about emulators, we went to a museum at the weekend, a science museum, and in the science museum, they had a retro games console room. You paid some money, you went in, and you could play on everything from SNESes, NESes, N64s, GameCubes, Amiga. I think I sent you a picture of an Amiga. They had gaming PCs in there. They had PS5s in there, PS4s, PS3s, PS2s, PS1s, Sega Master System 1, Sega Master System 2, Sega Mega Drives. Fantastic. I had to go on a bunch of games. I tried to encourage my 10-year-old to get into some of the retro Sonic that I used to play. He was less keen, but we did play Halo LAN party style with some random people we didn't know, sat round, a bench of tables like in an office space, and they were like, "Oh, who's Wart?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm Wart," and we all had names. It was all set up ready to roll. And you know what? Nearly every console in there just worked. They all were loaded with a game. You could just literally pick up a controller and play. And this Halo multiplayer map, it was just deathmatch style. It was brilliant fun. And there were people like me in their 40s playing it, 10-year-olds playing it, 15-year-olds playing it, and we were all just shooting each other for a bit of fun. And after us talking about the LAN party last week, it brought back some good nostalgia. Being in a room, round a table with your mates, or even random people, was actually quite exciting.
That's really cool.
It was cool. And I loved playing Sonic 1 on the Master System, because the Master System was my first games console. I'm playing the first version of Sonic. Again, my 10-year-old son, less than impressed, but for me, it was good. And we played a bit of Mario Kart on the GameCube. I wanted him to see kind of how far games have come, but there you go. The PlayStation 1 has not aged well graphically, I would suggest.
Well, maybe when we get the Providence emulator, we'll be able to check it out ourselves.
Yeah, that is true. But anyway, if ever you can go to a retro games thing, I would 100% recommend it. £8 to have, you can go all day. Fantastic.
You should put the name of it in the show notes so our listeners can check it out.
I will go and do that.
Moving on and slightly sticking with the retro theme, we'll have a very short main show. This was inspired by an article on Ars Technica about Palm OS and the devices that ran it. So Palm OS was a operating system for various Palm devices back in the day. It had sort of a gesture-based interface. In fact, ATP in their T-shirts over the last couple of weeks have got an ATP-inspired sort of design based on the Palm operating systems. Their input methodology was called graffiti, and it was like a shortcut to language. They all came with styluses. You wrote on the screen, and you could get on and you could do quite a lot with them, really. So there were Palm Zyres, there were Palm, I think there were Trios, there were all manners of Palm things, but they actually licensed the operating system to a company called Handspring. There's a documentary somewhere about this. And I bought a Handspring visor as well, and the sort of real selling point of the Handspring was at a docking port where you could plug other things into it. And the Palm OS went from being a static e-notepad, effectively, and maybe diary. You could plug in a modem. You could plug in a wireless modem to the Handspring. In fact, Palm ended up buying Handspring because this was such a revolutionary thing. And one of the first truly smart phones was the Handspring Treo, or the Palm Treo as it became, which was basically a Handspring visor running this Palm OS with sort of the internet attached to it at that point. And you could chart a very clear line from that to BlackBerry and other companies as they sort of came along. And it just made me feel a bit nostalgic for some of these sort of old devices, because when I think about my computing history, I've said before about how I went from C64 to Amiga, and you had a fairly similar path to me, I think.
Sorry, I was just trying to find the link. Yes, 100%. I had a very similar path to you. So I had a Palm 5. So my brother actually worked for 3Com, who bought Palm at some point. And I've just put a link to a documentary in about the Handspring piece. I didn't really know much about the Handspring piece. I think Handsprings were a lot bigger in America than they were here. I know you had one. But I had a Palm 5, and it was a bit ahead of its time in a way. It was made out of metal. It was a beautiful little device, fit in the palm of your hand. Really nice stylus OS on it. And I had that, I think, when I was at college, and it was fantastic. What a device. Obviously, cellular wasn't a thing. You had a dock and you could sync it with your PC. You could put your contacts on it. You could have your notes on it. It was awesome. I love that thing. And for me, it was kind of, I guess, kind of where we ended up with the phone. You know, it was a precursor in my world to having a phone. I didn't have a phone at the time. I just had this Palm. I loved it. It was great. I mean, I could play games. And there were app stores then. If you remember, you could go and download games from centralized hubs. You could pay money for games. You could get free games. All very similar to the world we now live in. So I think a lot of it was a precursor to where we ended up. Palm's had a rocky life, I think. I think they got bought by US Robotics, then they got bought by 3Com, and then they got bought by HP. So that did not do them any good as a company. They then tried to release a mobile, all based on HTML. So interesting company, super interesting history. But it was interesting having these devices, I think, at a time when you had a big beige box and this was your mobile compute space. I wasn't lucky enough to have a laptop back then. It was a long time until I got a laptop, probably when I went to university. It was just a different world that we were living in. But Palm OS was amazing because you could write on the screen with the stylus and it would recognize your handwriting. And it was awesome. Truly loved it.
Yeah, they were great devices, and I sort of came to them after I had a Scion first. So I don't know if you remember the Scion. It was a British device that sort of folded out and it had a keyboard and a screen, not a very high resolution. It was black and white. I don't think it was even properly backlit. But I remember nursing, and on night shifts, I decided I was going to write a novel. So when it was particularly quiet and I was trying to let the patient sleep and I'd done all my work, I'd sit and I'd bash out, and I'm sure I wrote like 300 or 400 pages of something on this little thing, and it's lost to time, unfortunately, because the memory sticks were very non-standard. They only worked in Scions, and when my Scion died, it went, and there is no remnant of that. But one of the things I did with that Scion is I had a little spreadsheet of drug interactions. So I can't give this if the patient's on that, this interacts with that. And it was really useful. And quite often other nurses would come to me and would use it as a lookup. So it sort of became a resource before we had such things on units, where you knew these interactions were. The BNF is a thing now. You can look for these things very, very easily. It's sort of built in. But I took that and re-implemented it when I got my handspring visor. And the format of it was even better because it was a higher resolution screen. They became color at some point as well, I remember them being. So you could actually have this sort of portable drug lookup for you. When I was there, and I'd written it myself, I was really sort of pleased with it. Probably where I could start my path into, going and doing computer science, in fact. But it was a really sort of meaningful device to me that I could have all this. I could have a couple of games on it. And I remember vividly, I got must have been a Bluetooth GPS, and you could run TomTom maps on your Palm, as it became at that point as well. And I blue-tacked my GPS thing to my Volvo's window, and I had TomTom, and it was the first time that I had something like that. Again, we take it for granted it runs on the phone these days, but it was such a huge deal that you could have TomTom running on your handspring, which was sat in the middle of the car, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, that is quite cool. They were great devices. Like I say, I think the Palm especially was a good precursor for Apple. Well-made hardware. Great software, really intuitive. You didn't really need a manual to use it. Very clever. Do you know what happened to Scion?
Not properly. Go on.
So they got bought by Motorola in 2012. I'm amazed they went on to 2012, if I'm being honest. But when you go to Scion.com, it actually takes you to Zebra, and they make printers and barcode scanners and things. A lot of manufacturing. So there's obviously, again, a bit like Palm, a bit of a potted history there of where they've been bought out, but I had no idea Motorola bought them.
No, it's a really strange thing, isn't it? Some of these, and don't forget, Apple had their own mobile computing platform, the Newton, which Steve Jobs killed when he came back to the company.
Yeah, and again, that was meant to be ahead of its time, very good, but killed it. And in hindsight, probably the right thing to kill it and do what they did, but at the time, obviously, it was a very bold move.
Yeah, it really was.
Did you ever have a Newton?
I didn't have a Newton. I've never even played with a Newton. Have you?
No. I'd like to have had a go on one, but I guess it's probably hard to look at it now if you don't remember the era it was in, and what was the equivalent. Was it around the Palm 5 time? I don't know.
It's one of those things you think you needed a killer app for these, and I think for me, for the Scion, it was, a word processor and a spreadsheet. I could do something with it. And the handspring had the same sort of stuff, but it came with all that software library, as you've talked about. The Game Boy had Tetris, that's what sold it back in the day. You had that killer app for it. The Mac had VisiCalc and it had programming and it had all the bits that came along with it. So I don't think that Palm or Handspring really had that moment more. That though they immediately got eclipsed by things that were better. And I think the operating system that Palm developed, WebOS, now runs in our LG TVs.
Yeah, it 100% does. I think it got bought by HP and then they spun it back out and LG picked it up. Because I think it was running on printers for a while, which seems like a massive waste of a WebOS. But no, yeah, it's running on all of our LG TVs, and I don't really use the OS on my TV, I must confess, but I'm sure it's very good.
Well, I had an issue the other day where all four on my Apple TV. I can't hit play on any of the things anymore. I can't watch Taskmaster on all four on the Apple TV. I've quit it. I've restarted it. Is it the TV? Is it the thing? So I've had to reconnect my TV to the internet, my Wi-Fi network, so I can watch all four on it. Works fine on that. I don't understand what's going on there. Is that Channel 4's fault? Is that Apple's fault? Don't know.
Yeah, that is a tricky one to debug. I've seen scenarios like that, but I'm so wedded to my Apple TV. I'm never going back to my regular telly.
You just wouldn't watch it, would you, if it didn't work on Apple TV?
Yeah, basically.
We've already said that iPlayer, for example, you don't get the 4K version.
I know. I was kicking myself as I said it but it's just super convenient and my family can use it.
Fair enough. Anything else to talk about with a bit of nostalgia?
No, I don't think so, but reliving my Palm 5. I'm a little gutted I don't have my Palm 5 anymore because I think that'd just be a nice piece of hardware. I've got some old iPhones in here and various bits. It was a nice piece of hardware.
There you go. Nostalgia this week is what we're selling.
Yes, this is the week of nostalgia before we get some new iPads next week.
Moving on, app of the week. My app of the week isn't an app of the week. I'm going to go with Chris and I'm going to have a thing of the week. So for those of you watching the video version of this podcast, you'll see I hopefully look a bit snazzier. I'm not using my iPhone, I'm using a new webcam. It's an Insta360. It's a very fancy little motorized 4K camera. I'm going to go away from the microphone for a minute and you might see it follow. So it does follow. It's got a desk view as well. One of the things I really like about it is when it's not in use, it folds itself down and looks down at the floor. So you can see it's not tracking you. You don't need a cover for this webcam because it's looking down. I think that's a really nice little feature. It's got a very snazzy startup sequence when it connects for the first time. It's got some AI gestures. At the moment it's looking at me. It's got a green ring around it. But every time I've held my hand up for the podcast, it's gone blue. I don't know what it's doing. It's flashing. Apparently you can get it to zoom in and out and do all sorts of bits and pieces like that. I need to look into what these gestures mean, but I just like the quality of it. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, so we're filming in the evening. You've got your blinds down. It's obviously getting dark outside. You've got some lights on. Picture quality looks very good. We filmed straight away, so obviously that was good. Their website's fantastic, by the way, so if anyone wants to click through and have a look at it, I think quite cool. And the first shot you see of it is how it mounts on the TV. They've got like a transparent screen and you can see where the arm goes behind it. I think it looks great. This was actually my backup solution for the Logitech I ended up buying. I went Logitech because I like my Logitechs, but the Insta360 I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was it was quite expensive. It was 264 quid, I think. I bought it from Amazon. I could have bought it from a company. It would have been the same price, but there was next day delivery and I kind of wanted to get on with it. What made me go Insta as much as anything else is that I've seen a few of their action cameras. When I was skiing, there were quite a few skiers wearing these sort of sat on top of their helmet straight up cameras, and I couldn't work out what they were, but it's because they're actually 360 cameras. They film all around you all the time, not just what's in front of you like the GoPro. They film all around you, which I thought was a really cool thing. So obviously they're reliable enough to take a few bumps out in skiing. I was a bit worried about buying a camera with motors in it, but so far so good. The tracking's not bad. I haven't installed the software on my Mac. You can get it to point at you in one direction. You can get it to stop tracking you. You can set all sorts of other bits and pieces in it. I need to learn about the AI thing. If I were to get up and walk around the room, it would follow me and focus, actually, for as far away as I was going to walk. I'm not going to do it because I need to be close to the microphone. But I've been really impressed with it so far. I've only had it a couple of days. This is the most use it's had in anger, and it seems to be coping quite well so far. I will note that there's a colour difference between we record the video part of the podcast in QuickTime, and obviously we talk to each other through Zoom. There's quite a significant colour differential between what Zoom shows and what QuickTime does. I don't know what's the real one. On their software, they offer a LUT. A LUT is something you can put into Final Cut Pro to give you colour correction. So you can also do them now with the Apple camera on your phone. You can put your own LUTs in, so it's color transformations. So that's really interesting, actually. I don't know how much I'm going to get into that. It's more editing than I can be bothered with, but very cool little camera.
I think it does look good. Certainly as a consumer of your output of camera, I think it looks really nice. So I think it's money well spent, but you said about the cost. The Logitech Brio MX I purchased was £220, so that seems to be the price for a good 4K camera, so I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we'd got past the COVID period gouging for webcams because everybody had rubbish webcams and wanted to look good all of a sudden, but I think a good webcam it costs what it costs.
Agreed. I think it does. But no, it looks good. And like you, I had the same color problem. I don't know whether QuickTime's more accurate or Zoom, but I'll just go with QuickTime because that's what I'm going to export.
Fair enough. Thing of the week.
So controversially for Rod and I've put down Clarkson's Farm Series 3 as my thing of the week, because my children are really looking forward to watching this. We live not that far from Clarkson's Farm. They've really enjoyed Series 1 and 2 and all the characters in it. And so I've put this down as thing of the week because I'm looking forward to it. It comes out on Friday. Very much planning to sit down in the evening and watch an episode. I kind of hope they release an episode a week, but I'm worried they're just going to drop the whole lot. But I think it would be cool. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yep, I've said a couple of times I've watched the first episode of Clarkson's Farm. I quite enjoyed it. I read an interview with him in The Guardian this Sunday about him sort of stepping back from his sort of slightly controversial stuff on global warming, which he used to say because he ran a car program. He's very much on the other side now. He does believe it's a thing. And I think that came over in his last episode of the Grand Tour where they were going around picking up plastic bottles. So if it was an act that's slightly problematic for me, I'd almost rather he was, as boorish as he brought himself over to be, because that could be quite harmful. But I could see how it'd be great entertainment.
Yeah, I think it is good entertainment. My children just think it's very funny, the stupid things he does, and I like watching something with my kids. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a nice family thing to do, and like I say, it's not far from us, so we may well go again and see the grounds and that.
Did I hear he was trying to open a pub as well?
Oh, he's been trying to do everything, I think, to be fair. And this is something that doesn't need to do anything. But yeah, he's been trying to open a pub. He's got a shop. He tried a restaurant. So lots going on there.
Fair enough. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, Rod. And look, if anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I am at _CJP@mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube if you go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.